Good evening, everyone. Right. We're up to Daf Tes Amud Aleph, a new Mishnah. Succca Yeshana, an old Succca. The more explain in a minute what the Mishnah explain what means the old Succca. Bishamai Poislin Ubitzimach Shiur. Bishamai say it's no good. Bishamai say it's okay. Beis Succca Yeshana, because also Kodim Lachag Shloshim Yom. You made it more than 30 days before Succos. If you made it for the sake of Succos, even from the beginning of the year, it's kosher. That means, if you make a Succah with the intention that it should be 4 Succos, it's kosher, both according to Beis and according to Yisroel, at any time of the year, because you made the Shem Succah. If you made it within the 30 days before Succos, both according to Beis and Yisroel, even if you don't intend it for it to be for Succos, it's kosher. Why 30 days? What's the 30 days? There's a mitzvah 30 days before Yom Tov to learn the halachas of Yom Tov. So you're already involved in the halachas of that Yom Tov. The whole machlokas is when you make it not for the sake of Sukkot, and you do it more than 30 days before Sukkot, according to Beis Shammai. Right. That's right. Here we're talking about a situation where you didn't say that you're going to do it for shade, and you didn't say that you're going to do it for Yom Tov. So you just stam. Wait a second, I was just getting clear. No. This Mishnah is going with Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai say it's not enough to make it for shade. Beis Shammai actually argue with the entire previous Gemara, and they say that all of those are no good. Right. Yeah, it's a shaila whether by Sukkot and by Shavuos it is 30 days, but to this Gemara is going like it. By Shavuos is the main machlokas. Okay. By Sukkot is also. Interesting thing. Who do we pass like V'Shamim B'Silon? Silon. So Succca Yeshana is kosher. I told you yesterday what to point out that we're machmir. The reason he said so is because of this tesis, the top tesis. The tesis says from Yerushalmi that even though we pascha like Beis, but one should be machmir and choishesh a little bit like Beis Shammai. Let's just see the tesis inside. Yerushalmi told us that chadash bo dovo chaver omin tefach v'yisem kolshu. Some say you should take a tefach up and down. This says even a little bit. I think what was that? So therefore, he says that even though we pass like Beis Shammai, even according to Beis Yisroel, there's a chumrah to do something to mechadash for the sake of Yom Tov. And then he brings a shayla legabe matzah. What about matzah yeshana? And Yerushalmi passes a matzah yeshana according to everybody is no good, because matzah were more chishash. The shame herchas that it should be kosher. If it's not kosher, therefore it's worse. Now, let's put out. That would be the shaila. The Yerushalmi paskins, if it's the shem mitzvah pesach, it's always kosher. If it's not the shem mitzvah pesach, then it's no good. Why is it no good? Because then what happens is you might not be kosher because you might not have kavanah the shem mitzvah. Okay. There's one point over here. Try and get it clear. According to Beis Yisroel, is there any difference between a sukkah which was made before 30 days or after 30 days? Anybody want to point out? Is there any difference? No. As long as there's no difference whatsoever. Why not? Because Beis Yisroel hold that you don't need it l'shem chag. So it makes no difference if it's more than 30 days or after 30 days. According to Beis Yisroel, sukkah yeshana, it's kosher. So it makes no difference. The last statement of our Mishnah that makes a difference between before 30 days and after 30 days is only according to Beis Shammai. Now, there's a question which the Gemara sometimes asks, is that usually Rabbi Yehuda Nasi does not bother telling us halacha according to the opinion, which we don't pass like. So why did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi need to tell us the difference between before 30 days and after the 30 days, when it only makes a nafkamin according to Beis Shammai, and according to Beis Yisroel makes no difference? Anybody wants to? Oh, very, very good. You thought to yourself? Says Tesis. They must have you have to have 2 lechaims. That the point is that if you do it within 30 days before Sukkot, Even if you have no intention for sukkahs, then you don't need to be mechadish for double, and therefore that's why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi needed to add it in. And then he says you should just be aware that sometimes Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did add something, even though it was not enough kimina alocha l'maisa. So it adds a few more words. Sometimes the Tana will explain what the machlikas is, even though there's enough kimina alocha l'maisa. That means there is enough kimina though in this chumrah of the chadish b'dovo. According to his Hillel, if you do it in 30 days, you don't need to be mechadish b'dovo. Okay, so we've got machlikas b'shama b'silim, and as Anthony asked, the whole sugya yesterday is going b'shidras b'silim. We have to explain a little bit better. According to Beis Hillel, there's no inyan to build a sukkah for the sake of sukkahs. According to Beis Shammai, it has to be for the sake of sukkahs. If you build it 6 months before sukkahs, you have to intend. If you build it within 30 days, we automatically assume that's your intention. So that all the Gemaras of yesterday, all different kinds of sukkahs that are kosher, is all going b'shittas Beis Hillel that they don't care. So if you build a sukkah because you want to be a farmer and you want to have shade, so that's kosher. That's what it could be a sill, could be a shama. That won't be kosher because at the end of the day you didn't do the shim sukkahs. So really, the machlikas of shama b'sill is: do you need lishmo in sukkah? Do you need lishmo? Says the my time is a b'shamai. Omar ko chaga sukkah shiva somim laHashem. Sukkah asuyo l'shem chag b'yinon. You need a sukkah for the sake of Hashem. U'b'sill. The wood of the sukkah is also for all 7 days. You're not allowed to use them for your own benefit. So the pasuk says laHashem for Hashem. The Shammai say laHashem, it has to be lishmo. Beis Hillel say laHashem, they're not allowed to get hand off. The third taste, as we did the first two mostly, the third taste discusses the problem is atzei sukkah osam in hatei or midrabanon. We always understand the reason why it's a sukkah osam within muktzah. That since you set it aside for the mitzvah, it's called huktzah mitzvah also, which is why esrog is also awesome. And here the Gemara brings a pasuk which is mashma it's issa deiraisa. This has two mahalchim. What the difference is? For example, one nafkimina is it depends if it's still standing, it's awesome in hateva. If it's collapsed, it's awesome in du'abonon. And Teisa says another answer says that which you absolutely need for the sukkah is deiraisa. The extra bits, what you only need very little to be yotzim in hateva. The extra bits are awesome in du'abonon. That's two mahalchim and Teisa to differentiate. That means this is a topic which is a huge topic. Is atzei sukkah awesome deiraisa with du'abonon? We do not have time to go into it, but you should be aware. The Gemara here brings a pasuk. Later, much later, the Gemara is going to tell us that it's muktzah. Muktzah is always du'abonon. So that's a big question. It's awesome with du'abonon. Another big question is like this. Are you allowed to lean against the sukkah? Let's say you're standing outside the sukkah. Let's say I go and visit you. We're chatting in the garden, and you've got a sukkah there. Am I allowed to lean against the garden? Your sukkah, obviously, a sukkah that won't collapse when you're leaning on it. Mutter asa. The Gemara says over here, what's the words of the Gemara? The forbidden all 7. What does it mean forbidden all 7? What does that mean? The forbidden bahno? No, they still have the rules. So the Rishonim say it's only asa if you diminish from the sukkah, you pull off a splinter to pick your teeth, or something like that. But to lean against the sukkah, according to most Rishonim, there's no problem. It's interesting that we shouldn't even have such a shaila. Okay. Says the Gemara right to Vitanya. Yehuda brings another drasha. Yehuda will say, just like you call the chagiga is asa, it's the shem shemaim. Kachal shem shemaim and sukkah. Shenem b'chag sukkah sheva shem Hashem, and he does a different slightly drasha. Chag and Hashem. Ma chag la Hashem, just like the chagiga la Hashem, af sukkah la Hashem. So this asks the kasha very short. It's fourth says that you've got two drashas to tell us that that's a sukkah asa ba'anob. One is because it says La Hashem, that is L'Shem Shemaim, it is also Bano. And one because the Torah says Chag, we compare it to the Chagiga, which is the Korban, which is also Bano. Why did he two? And this answers, if you only have one, you darshan La Hashem like Beis Shammai darshan it, that you have to build it Lishmo. Okay. So that's why you have to have two. One to tell you that it's L'Shem. That you shouldn't think that the other one is just to teach you Lishmo. You have to have two drashas like it's also Bano. So the Torah says Chag HaSukkos La Hashem, and what at this stage understands, the Machlik Shama B'Sirel is, according to Beis Shammai, Hashem teaches you what? Lishmo. You have to do the Shem Mitzvah. According to Beis Hillel, you don't need to do the Shem Mitzvah. According to Beis Hillel, the main thing is that it's Asa B'Hana. The Gemara. Beis Shammai also need to know the halacha that Sukkah is Asa B'Hana. And the Gemara says you're right. And my Tamayu, Beis Shammai Ksiv Kuachina, they tell in a different drasha. So somebody would say to Chag HaSukkos La Hashem, what do we learn from the word for La Hashem? No, not anymore. The Gemara now is chayza and says that even Beis Shammai agree you need the word La Hashem to tell you that it's also b'hano, and the word La Hashem, they dash the different drasha. But the Gemara retracts. The Gemara saying that La Hashem tells you, the Gemara says, Enochinami, you're right, that Beis Shammai also indeed learn La Hashem is not lishmo, but that it's also b'hano. And in my time, Beis Shammai ksivku achino, chag ha-sukkah is ta'aseh l'cho shivah samim, Succca asuyo l'shem chag. Chag ha-sukkah is a sukkah is made for Yom Tov. Chag ha-sukkah is allowed to make a sukkah on Chol HaMoed. Now he's allowed to build a sukkah on Chol HaMoed. The Gemara later brings the machlokas as to whether you're allowed to build a sukkah or not. We still say you're allowed to. The Gemara discusses what the shaylas are. So the machlokas is on the second pasuk. Chag ha-sukkah. Beis Shammai say, if you still say Chag HaSukkah, it's allowed to build a sukkah in the middle of the Chag. Beis Shammai say, no, Chag HaSukkah is, you have to take a sukkah l'shem Chag. And that same machlokas will depend on another machlokas, are you allowed to build a sukkah in the middle of Chol HaMoed?
What do you do if you travel?
We'll see later. Gemara says, you can't build another sukkah on Chol HaMoed. Okay.
Yeah, but you've got to your sukkahs yourself, so how are you going to...
Find somebody else's sukkah. Go and find somebody who's built a sukkah and then...
That's Beis Shammai anyway.
There's no sukkah.
There's no sukkah, you can't build a sukkah, you've got the sukkah, you're part of it. Yeah, it's possible, yes. But we're fading Gemara, but according to Yisroel, you do not need to build the sukkah lishma. Did you ask something? I didn't say so.
No, the same. It's Beis Shammai says you can't build on Chol HaMoed.
Yeah, we passed that. Yeah, he's asking the Beis Shammai. Yeah. Let's do that. Build the Marab. Also in that case, we're talking about the mitzvah of tzitzis. Mitzvah of tzitzis is to put strings on the corner of your clothes. Now, many times, even without trying, you can have strings in the corner of your clothes. How is that possible? How can you have strings in the corner of your clothes? The Gemara says, "Awesome in that koitzin." What happens is sometimes the thread would snap in the middle of the weaving. So what do? You take another thread and tie it on. Now, when you tie a thread to another thread, the way you do it is you've got strings hanging down from the knot, because it's very hard to tie another thread to a thread and there should be nothing left over. So sometimes you can have a nice shirt or vest, and it's got strings coming out from where the thread snapped, and you tied it together, and then you've got strings coming out. That's koitzin. Nimin. Nimin is sometimes you embroider at the bottom of your clothes a nice rim, and from the embroidery comes out other strings. Golden. Golden is fringes. What happens is you didn't really sew it so well all the way to the end, and therefore you've got fringes. So what happened was you've got an item of clothing, which without you putting strings in, already have strings. Are you allowed to use those strings for tzitzis? Psula, it is possible. Why is it possible? It's not a shmo, very good, it's not a shmo. Sisin kasher. Sisin is, you've already got threads, you made them into threads without the shem mitzvah, and then what happened was, afterwards, you add those threads. This is, by the way, the machlokas. Do you need tvia lishma? Does the strings need to be sapan lishma? One time I was living here at Seifert. So I saw Bob. I said to him, I said to him, "Can I walk you? Can I walk the road?" Yes. He said, "Well, I'm going shopping." Okay, I'll go shopping with him. Fine. He was going to buy himself tzitzis, and he came to the shop, and the shop sold two kinds of threads. I'll never forget this. There was those which were spun lishma, tovu lishma, and the ones which were not spun lishma. And the ones which were spun lishma were more than 3 times the price. And they stood there about 5 minutes back and forth, and then he bought the ones which were spun lishma. I could see him struggling very lot with it. We packed sisters bundles of thread, were balls of thread which you never made it originally, and therefore it says ksheva. The Mishnah brings that it's a chumrah to have spun lishma. You will buy the spun lishma. You will buy lishma. Oh, very good. Tvia niputz is before the tvia even. Niputz is when they is even earlier. But nowadays the more. The point is, how much you pay for your strings? Never noticed. Yeah, you sure? Okay. So that's a lot more. I think there was a shadiput to Shmuel Lama. Okay, Kabit the Shmuel Lama. After that, Sissin Nami Psula. Also for the Sissin, it's also possible. Shmuel held that you need to have Tovil Shmuel. Don't pass back. The brain on Tvil is Shmuel. Shmuel says you need to have Spanish Shmuel. I mean, the Shai is the Shmuel. But one thing is clear. Oh, very good.
You tell yourself you're not.
One thing is clear. One thing is very clear. What's very clear is that you need tzitzis lishma. If you need tzitzis lishma, why by sukkah don't you need? Says the Gemara, you should just need sukkah lishma. Well, says Shani awesome. Make it for yourself, for your obligation. Make it for your obligation. So we should say the same Joshua by sukkah. And so who we burn in the yours not stolen. The stolen sukkah you're not yours. You should also say that Gozo is no good. There the Torah says twice. You should say, it says, one to tell you that stolen tzitzis is no good, and one to tell you that you have to do it in Shmo. Now, shaking by Sukkot, only one drasha says only telling you that you have to do it, that it mustn't be stolen. Just two small holes. I want to move on. One, Tis asks the obvious question: why did the pasuk to tell you that a sukkah or tzitzis that's stolen is not kosher? It's anyway no good. So Tis suggests, which is a very big chiddush, and many people argue it's okay. By me, it's 5 lines in the middle. That means the halacha is, we will later discuss a lot of that. He also says this is a mitzvah baba is only to rabbanon, and by sukkah and tzitzis you have to be more machmir. So that's a shaila. That means it's a device to be yotzah. Yeah, right. They're exactly right. One other small point is there's a very big shaila in the poskim. You can look it up. It's a big shaila. And it's very, very common, isn't it? So a lot of people don't have where to build the sukkah, so they build it on the road and on the street. The question is it a sukkah gezurah or the yotzah? One said tshuva from Koi Kodesh, where he writes that he would not even make a bracha in such a sukkah because it's a sukkah gezurah happens.
By now, everyone, because everyone does it.
No, Gemara says lechol it should be stolen, right? What? Right, it's a machlokes in the poskim. I remember one.
I'm assuming that today with because
That's really yes. Okay.
Know about it.
It's cancelled tax still because okay. I'm just telling you it's machlokes. I'm not somebody who can tell you what the halacha is. That's right. Oh, that's the message. When you buy a balcony in where's the good place? Galegula. The Galegula is not the most expensive. You have to. That's right. Oh, you better have the ground floor. Very good. Oh, it has to be ground floor because otherwise you can't eat your common Pesach there. Okay. No. Says the Mishnah, the top of Testament Beis. Makes a sukkah underneath the tree. Forbidden inside his house. Sukkah gave sukkah top of another sukkah. The top one's kosher, the bottom one's possible. If you can't live in the top one, or we will explain it, the bottom one's kosher. So Mishnah told us 2 halachas, very similar ones. One is that you can't make a sukkah underneath a tree or in the house. Another one is you can't make a sukkah on top of another sukkah. Says the Gemara, only if the tree has got mostly shade. If it's a tree that's only have a bit of sun, only a bit of shade and mostly sun, it is kosher. How do I know this? Says Rava. Mishnah says if you made it inside the house. Why do you have to say it? Why such a long-winded way of saying it? If I say make a sukkah underneath the tree, as if you made it inside the house, what would you have said? Say pasuk. Let's say pasuk. I should say pasuk. And just like a house is mostly shade. How do you know the house is more shade than sunlight? What? Bed. Well, because that's a normal house. It's impossible. Most houses, a house is made for protection. Nobody lives in a house where there's more gaps than ceiling. So therefore, the Mishnah is telling you that if you make a sukkah underneath a tree, it is possible, like you make it underneath a house. The Mishnah doesn't say the word possible. It just says like make it underneath a house to teach you. Just like underneath a house, it's no good. Only when it's also underneath a tree. So if you've got a tree on top of your sukkah, so you have to look carefully at the tree. If it's got a very lot of shade, like the trees I can see over here, so then it's no good. If it's only a little bit of tree branches, then you're okay to build the sukkah underneath it. Right. The answer is because it's only a small amount. Since it's only a small amount, and we'll explain more in detail in a minute. Since it's only a small amount, so if it doesn't bother us, the fact that there's a bit like, for example, if you've got foam wires over your sukkah, it's only a small amount. Who cares? Oh, there you go. They was going to use that losh in a minute or before then. At the moment now, but just one more point is Rashi says, how do we even know that a tree which is growing is possible? How do we know? Mechete says it's not kabel tumah, it's not a keli. So the answer is because the Torah says, what you gather is something which is already tolush, which is already not connected to the ground. It's already what? Detached. And therefore anything which is attached to the ground is possible. Right. So the Gemara says like this. So the Maisa, so therefore the Gemara says like this. Therefore a tree on top of a sukkah is only possible if the tree has got a very lot of shade, at least 51% shade. The Gemara, like the answer was, how come it's stav schach posel bad is schach kosher? The schach posel is with stav bad is schach kosher. The question is exactly what's the Gemara's question. And there are many mahalchim. I'll just say one mahalch, it's the Bach's mahalch, the simple, very straightforward mahalch. Imagine like this. You've got a sukkah which is, let's say, 60% covered, because it's less than 50%, it's possible. That's the first Mishnah we had. If it's 49% covered, it's possible. So it's 60% covered. And you've got a tree on top of it. The tree only takes up, let's imagine, only 20%. Only 20% of it is branches. The rest of it is a very barren tree, hardly any branches, only 20%. The problem is, anything underneath the 20% is possible. So if you take 20% off your 60%, how much have you got left? 40%. So you've got most of these chach, but you've not got a kosher sukkah. That means if you've got a sukkah which is 51, which is just over, which is kosher, if you have to knock away the area which is covered by your tree, and the tree, even if it's only 20, 30%, you could end up with less than 50% schach kosher. And that's the Gemara's question, how in the world is it kosher? This is not the only malach in the Gemara, the other states go for malach, but that is how the Bach understands that Yisroel Mashi is the Gemara's kosher. Answers the Gemara, Omar Apapa b'shechavta. Apapa says b'shechavta means you mix them up together. If you mix them up together, what happens? Bittul. And what happens is you take the branches from on top, you push them down into your schach kosher, mix them up, even if they're still growing, you can still mix it up, and then it is kosher. The Achronim ask the Taz and others that there's a special halacha called ein mevatin isser lechatchila. Means if you've got a bit of non-kosher meat, let's just one more point again. Let's say the tree branches are 20, 30%, and yours is let's say it's 45% possible tree branches, and you've got 55%. So you mix the two together. Why is it kosher? Because halacha is minatera, a bit of bevoiv is enough. Minatera, if you've got a tray for a piece of meat, and a kosher piece of meat which is slightly bigger, that's already called bottom, right? In the case where you don't know which was right. In the case you've got bittul, you don't need to have double. Bittul b'voiv only needs to be a little bit more. So if your schach kosher is 55% and the tree branches are 45%, you mix the two together, you're fine because bottom b'voiv. The cash is in mevatel isser lechatchila. You're not allowed to mevatel isser on purpose. Here you're going in mevatel isser lechatchila. Anybody want to suggest an answer? It's one of these questions which there are many, many, many answers. The Magen Avraham himself writes 3 different answers. Anybody want to suggest an answer? The Magen Avraham says we're talking about an Erev Sukkot. Erev Sukkot is not yet also because you're not mitzvah sit in the Sukkah. Says the Magen Avraham, the Beis of Pascha, this Mishmur gets very upset that that would come out to big chumrah. You wouldn't be allowed to do this in Chol HaMoed. Such a Sukkah built in Chol HaMoed would be no good. There's one answer which the Taz says, and the Shmuel says himself, this is the Taz which he likes best. I was hoping somebody would suggest it. It's interesting, like a particular Lomdischer answer. The question is, how can you mix the 45% of schach kosher within your 55% of schach kosher on purpose to make your sukkah kosher? Says the Taz, is when you've got something which is forbidden, a chefzete isur, something which is actually forbidden. Here, there's absolutely no isur. What's the isur over here? There's no isur in those branches. There's a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah. The mitzvah to eat in the sukkah requires that I should build a certain kind of structure. In order to make that structure permitted, I am doing something to make it that the schach should now be kosher schach. The way you put it is when you've got issa on the chefza, when there's something wrong with it. When there's a problem with a person, that means he's not allowed to eat unless he's going to a certain place. That's what is lechatchila. He himself is the issa. The issa is on him not to eat outside the sukkah. He's eating in the sukkah. This is now a kosher sukkah. And he said that's not mechlal in the din of vatnes lechatchila. Vatnes lechatchila is when you're trying to get rid of stigma, of something which is actually the taste is forbidden. Here, there's nothing. The Torah never says there's something forbidden. There's nothing wrong with these branches. If you want to eat that during the rest of the day, it's your mitzvah to eat in the sukkah. The mitzvah to eat in the sukkah can be done by arranging these branches become kosher. That's what the Taz says. Okay. So Noah's answer is that you mix them. It's very interesting. I just happened to see today, you pointed out a few times, the Dilshmish the is up to the same place, is that the Beis says that he saw one of the Rishonim. The word Shechavton doesn't just mean that you mix them, it means you first cut them and then you mix them, which is a very big chumrah. First you cut it off the base and then you mix them. And the Beis says, well, I don't need to listen to it because it's only one Rishon and the Shebua writes in the Bi'alochen. We'll discuss that because of Tassel. Okay, he says it's interesting. He says that the Rabbi Hananel came out after the Beis Yosef, and if you look over here on the side, the Bi'alochen writes very sweet lashon that we were lucky that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us the light of Rabbi Hananel. And Hananel also says this chumrah that you have to actually cut them first. Nice, we don't pass like it. I'm just telling you, which is interesting that the Bi'alochen, Simon, what is it? Top Chavov. No, because what's happened is you build the sukkah, you've got the branches, you've got the schach on top, and then you cut it. I don't want to go into that. If you mix them up, mind remember what's the chiddush? So therefore, the chiddush is that we're talking about a sukkah which has got 50%, 5% kosher schach, a shvi on top of which is 45%. You then mix the two up. And it's permitted, and the chiddush is that you might have thought that one year you might not mix it. We learn that as well. If you spread over it the vine, at the last, I looked up in the article, translated as the word gourd. It's kind of pumpkin, I think. There's a kissus, ivy, I saw the Bartanur says, why these three plants? Because if you ever wanted to make big leaves and spread over, these are the kinds of things. It's just technical. There's no reason of these. What? If it was a lot of schach, or you cut it kosher, you need to mix them, or schach is no good. We talk about we mix them. So you got before Mishnah, we're not going to because Mishnah is talking about that case. If you didn't mix it, it'll be a apostle. It must be mixed. Answers the Gemara, we still needed Rav Papa's words. That Mishnah could be talking about B'diavad or Lechatchila. That is okay, even Lechatchila. So Lechatchila, you're allowed to have a sukkah underneath a tree. You have to have a lot of nerves for these things, right? And then what you have to do is then take the branches, mix them with your branches, and then you're absolutely okay, even if you've got, as I said, 45% branches and 55% schach. How do we know that the sukkah top of the sukkah is no good? The sukkah is teishvu, the sukkah is shtachas sukkah. The sukkah is shtachas ilon, the sukkah is shvusei Beis. We learn from the word the sukkah is teishvu, not a sukkah underneath the sukkah, not a sukkah underneath the house, not a sukkah underneath the tree. Fading more. Later. Well, that is a different chiddush. That's different. That's all about a temporary thing that moves around. Here we're talking about a permanent structure. We'll come to it more. So we learned from the sukkah stage for three things: not underneath a house, not underneath a tree, and not underneath a sukkah. Sukkah is plural. Plural is mashma. You should sleep in many sukkahs. It says mashma that sukkah of another sukkah should be even better. Ask Mom by Yisroel by Succca. It's written without a vav in the singular to tell you that you have to have it once. So now we talk about cases where two sukkahs on top, one on top of the other. What Yimya does, which does a number of places, he says like this: it is possible that both sukkahs should be kosher. It's both possible that both sukkahs should be possible. It is possible that one sukkah, the up one, should be possible, and it's possible that the bottom one should be possible. That's what Yimya says. So he gives us four different scenarios. And the basic rule is like this. The halacha is that a sukkah underneath a sukkah is only possible if the bottom one is actually a proper sukkah. And then if you've got a proper sukkah, and then on top of it you've got another sukkah, so that's no good. Let's say the bottom one has got more sunlight than shade. So it's not a real sukkah. And then you've got the top one, it's got a lot of shade. So then you're fine. Why? Because when you go underneath the bottom one, there's a lot of pictures, but I will not put them up because the pictures are just so detailed. So the mind can sometimes absorb things better. If you've got loads of schach, it's like very, very thick, a few feet thick. For example, let's say it's branches, therefore it's not like a put your hand in the schach itself. Would you be still inside the schach? Of course you are. As long as you've got schach on top of you, the fact that you're within the schach area, you're still kosher. So if you've got a sukkah with a little bit of schach, not enough, and then on top of it you've got a sukkah with a lot of schach, that's absolutely fine because you've got a sukkah underneath a sukkah. It's like one big sukkah in theory. Now what happens if the top one is higher than 20 amas and the lower one doesn't have enough schach? So what will happen? They're both possible. So what happens is, because the top one, you can't use the schach with that one, and the bottom one, you can't use the same possible. And he uses combinations to explain that you can have both kosher, both possible, and one kosher, one possible. It's very straightforward. Sometimes sheshtem kshers both kosher, sheshtem psulos both has both possible. Sheshtem kshers balune psulo, sheshtem psulo balune kshero. It says the bottom one's kosher, top one's possible, and sometimes vice versa. Sheshtem kshers echidam. Keep going. Has got more sun than shade. So therefore, what is it? It's not a real sukkah. It's just got a little bit of branches. It's like, for example, you've got a sukkah and a branch comes out in the middle. You put a bit of greenery to come out. Then it doesn't matter. But it's got more shade than light. Otherwise, it would also be possible. It's still within 20. Now, over here, I wrote it into my Gemara because I found it so confusing. He's going to always use the words b'soich esin within 20. But there's a fundamental difference that twice when he says within 20 means within 20 of the floor, and twice it means within 20 from the floor of the base, that means from the roof of the bottom one. So when he says 20 amas, it doesn't always mean consistent at 20 hours. Over here, when he says it's within 20, it has to be within 20 hours from the bottom of the floor. Because if it's from 20 amas higher than the roof, if it's more than 20 amas from the floor, but less 20 amas from the roof of the bottom, it will be possible. Why would it be possible? Because since the bottom one doesn't have enough schach to be kosher, so therefore we're measuring from the floor, the real ground, we're going to go to ground floor and the roof of the first sukkah. Here, 20 amas is from ground floor. It's from the ground floor. Next one, is both apostle. Both have more shade than the sun. They came, therefore, why is the bottom one possible? Anybody tell me why is the bottom one possible? No, both of them are tzilas bubba bechamosan. They both have more shade than sunlight. Because it's sukkah tachas sukkah. So since it's sukkah tachas sukkah, it's the first possible. Because that one's a sukkah and the top one's a sukkah. So it's no good. They came and the top one's 120 amas, which is interesting. Here, it is more than 20 amas, says Rashi, from the floor of the thing. Because if it's less than 20 amas from the floor, but it's more than 20 amas from the floor of the gun, it doesn't matter. Why? In itself, it's okay. Because in itself, it's okay. Let's get this very clear. Over here, when he says it's 120 amas, it's 120 amas from the roof of the bottom sukkah. Why? Because if, let's say, it's only 18 amas from the roof, and it's 25 amas from the floor, it would be okay. Because it would be like building a sukkah on a porch, on your porch, where you're in Ganegula, you're 50 amas above ground floor, but you're building it from the porch floor, so it doesn't matter, it's kosher. As long as this sukkah is within the penthouse. So therefore, it has to be 20, when over here it says it's possible, it has to be more, it has to be possible, it has to be that it's more than 20 amas from the roof. So again, why are both possible? The bottom one is possible, the sukkah tachas sukkah. The top one is possible because the sukkah itself is higher than 20 amas. And here, call it the sukkah tachas sukkah, even though the top one is the apostle, because the answer is the sukkah underneath it, it's no good. Also, over here, sometimes the bottom one's kosher, the top one's possible, top of Yud Amud Aleph. Hey Chidami. It's got more shade than sunlight, so it's kosher. And the top one is got more sunlight than shade, so therefore it's not a real sukkah. And they're both within 20 amos. And here again, 20 amos means literally from the floor, not from the roof. Because if it's more than 20 amos from the floor, it's no good. So over here, we're talking about you got a sukkah. When somebody builds another sukkah on top, and it doesn't matter, because the sukkah on top has got such a little bit of schach that it's not considered the sukkah. So therefore it's kosher. Yes. But the top was anyway possible. So because it's got the schach. But we're talking about to make the bottom one kosher. It says b'seich esrim. It means within 20 of the floor, not of the roof. Of itself. Yes. That's right. But
the bottom won't get some shade from the wall.
That doesn't matter. The bottom one has to be within 20 amos of itself. That's right. The both have a more shade. The Kamalun has got within 20 amos. So there again, let's get it very clear. Both of them have got more shade than night. So they're both kosher. The bottom one is possible. Why is it possible? Sukkah tachas sukkah, right? You've got sukkah underneath the sukkah, literally, because both of them have got enough more shade than night. And the top one is kosher because it's within 20 amos. Within which 20 amos? No, here's interesting. It's from the roof. Why is it from the roof? Because since the bottom one has a very, very lot of schach, it's considered a proper floor. So therefore, as long as it's within 20 amos from the roof of the bottom one, it is kosher. Rashi says all of this. He actually adds, he said the very kitzah. So, right. Yes. Yeah.
One of the examples here is when they're both good.
Yes.
Which means you've got sukkah above the sukkah.
Right.
So how can you have them when they're both good? The Mishnah says that.
Right, because the Mishnah is talking about the case where the top one has got a very lot of shade and the bottom one has a very lot of shade. And that's why it's possible. I mean, the Gemara is going to explain in a minute that our Mishnah is not about all cases. Certain cases, even our Mishnah would agree that both kosher. Rabbi is not arguing our Mishnah. He's talking about an example which the Mishnah wasn't talking about. Our Mishnah is talking about normal sukkah. Normal sukkah has got a very lot of shade, and therefore, since you've got two sukkahs, a lot of shades, therefore the bottom one's possible because the sukkah underneath the sukkah. Now, Rabbi was a more complicated case, so the bottom one's got a little bit of shade, and therefore it's kosher. Well, the more will explain. Okay. All of this, other than an exercise of cheshbonos, he hasn't actually taught us a new halacha. Most says yes, he has. In a case where the bottom one is kosher, that means it's got a lot of shade. The top one's posel. That's the chiddush. Why was the top one posel? Because we're talking about that the top one had a lot of sunlight. So therefore, sometimes, in fact, it would be possible, and therefore, you need to teach you why. If you got a sukkah which is 55% covered, which is good, and on top of it, you've got another sukkah which is only 45% covered. So then, till now, you said it's the top one's possible, the bottom one is kosher. Why is the bottom one kosher? Because it's not a sukkah tachas a sukkah. Because since the top one's possible, it's not a sukkah underneath the sukkah. Says, well, yeah, it's no good. Because if here you've got 45% possible, and that is going to then minimize the schach kosher. The only way to make it kosher is if the amount of schach on the top one is so small that you still have more shade than light in the bottom one. So we're talking about where the top one has literally a minimal amount of schach. And you might have thought that that would be possible because of a gezerah to a case where you'd come to rely, even when it's got a lot of schach, that we know it's okay. Okay. How much gap should there be between the sukkah to the sukkah? So here there's a very long mashal. I was quite fascinated that mashal is actually quoted in the Mishnah Berurah. Imagine. Mashal says that a sukkah underneath a house or sukkah underneath a tree, it makes no difference how much space. Even a tefach, 5 tefachim, 10 tefachim, it's always possible. Right? Here we're discussing the sukkah underneath a sukkah. By a sukkah underneath a spot. And therefore the Gemara understood that it's only if there's a proper gap between the two. And the Gemara brings 3 opinions and 3 svarts. A tefach. We're doing a tefach. Maybe it's a tumah, maybe it's very, very briefly. Imagine this box is a tefach by a tefach. It is, it's about 2 tefachim by 1 tefach. But imagine it was a tefach by a tefach. And imagine this is a dead body. So what happens is if the thing goes on top of it, and then somebody walks underneath the other half of the tefach, so a tefach is considered a tent. So therefore, if there's a dead body on the part of it, the person walks up the other part of it, it becomes tummy. Alternatively, if the tefach is over it, so that blocks the tumah from going up. A tefach is considered a proper tent, legabe tumah. But if it's, let's say, less than a tefach, let's say, for example, this is less than a tefach, and let's say there's a dead body underneath half the cup, and I walk underneath the other half of the cup, I will not become tummy. Why will I not become tummy? Because since it's less than a tefach, it's not considered a tent. So we see legabe hulchas tumah, a tefach is considered the oil, a tent. So also what I did by Sukkah, if there's a tefach gap between the schach, it would be possible. It would come out a huge chumah. Let's say, for example, you put out a mat, and then you decide to make it very decorative. So what you do is you put a whole load of schach at a lower with a tefach space. I don't know how you would do it. You would use, let's say, slats or something, and you would put a whole load of greenery. And between the greenery and your mat would be a tefach. According to Avodah, it would be possible. Don't pass like Avodah. It's not so common because usually it's all quite squashed together. But if it would be such a good Avodah, it would be possible. Says the Gemara, it has to be 4 tefachim. Why? We never find an area which is choshev of less than 4. Anybody know what they're talking about when you need 4 tefachim? Wait, Shabbos. The guy Shabbos, any area which is less than 4 by 4 is not a Rishus HaYochin or Shabbos, it's not a Rishus at all. We mentioned, for example, if you've got these bollards, sometimes you have a bollard next to a main road, and you carry from Rishus Rabbi onto the bollard, what have you done? Nothing. It's from Rishus Rabbi to Makbid Tov, Rishus HaYochin to Makbid Tov, because it's not 4 by 4. It has to be 4 by 4. I remember when we were learning Eruvin, there was somebody who went to pick something up and put it on a post of Shabbos, and you just started measuring if that post was 4 by 4 to see is choshev. So you see that less than 4 by 4 is not a rishus. You should be aware. A lamppost is not a rishus, right? If you on Shabbos stand on M62 and you throw your wallet on top of the street lights, you're not done anything. Why not? Because it's less than 4 by 4. So you see that it has to be 4 by 4. What? No, then after Shabbos go and fetch it, I assume. The Shmuel Omar, I saw you need 10, and that's what we pass. My time with the Shmuel, just like the hechsher, what's kosher for sukkah, that makes it possible. According to Shmuel, to be considered a sukkah underneath the sukkah, it has to be that the top sukkah is a potentially kosher sukkah. So if the top sukkah is less than 10 tefachim, so it's not a sukkah. So if less than the top sukkah is only 8 tefachim tall, so therefore it's not a kosher sukkah. So for the bottom sukkah is kosher. It's only when you've got a kosher sukkah on top of another sukkah that we say that the bottom sukkah is possible. And therefore we need 10 tefachim. That's how we passed it. The more now explains this is what you want. To that. If nobody lives in the top one, the bottom one is kosher. What does it mean that nobody lives? If it means literally there's no inhabitants, doesn't make a difference if people are living there or not. It doesn't make a difference if people live there. It should make, let's for example, everybody went away from that sukkah. They couldn't bother to stay for sukkahs. They went off to another town. That's not going to make any difference in a sukkah when people live there or not. That cannot be. It must be the potential for living there. That obviously it means that if people cannot live there, that means we're talking about the top sukkah. But Yehuda says if nobody lives there, meaning nobody could live there, meaning it's not 10 tefachim high, because we mentioned once before, anything less than 10 tefachim high, nobody can live there. So if it's not 10 tefachim high, says Rabbi Yehuda that the bottom one is kosher because it's not a real sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda's arguing the Tanakh. The Tanakh says sukkah tachas sukkah, it's possible. Rabbi Yehuda limits it only if the top one has people living. We explained people living means people have potential to live. Potential to live, we explained, means that it's 10 tefachim. But the Tanakh doesn't say all of this. Is a vaya that what does the Tanakh hold? That even if it's not 10 tefachim, it's possible. It's rather sukkah tachas sukkah, it's not 10 tefachim. They said in the West, which is there, it's all. We're talking about a different issue, not the size of the sukkah. We're talking about the strength of the floor. That means the roof of the bottom sukkah is so weak that if you put a pillow blanket, the whole thing would fall in. Since they would all fall in, nobody can live there. Since nobody can live there, it's not a sukkah. Since nobody can live there, it's not a sukkah. Therefore, it's not a sukkah tachas sukkah. And Rabbi Yehuda wasn't talking about 10 tefachim, 9 tefachim, 8 tefachim. Rabbi Yehuda said if nobody lives there, means nobody can live there because it's so weak, the floor. So it's not a sukkah tachas sukkah, and therefore it's kosher. If that's the case, even if you can't live there, it's possible. That doesn't make any sense. Because according to Shmuel, what did Shmuel just say? Only if the top sukkah is 10 tefachim. Why did Shmuel say only 10 tefachim? Rashi says this whole cheshbon. Why did Shmuel say only? Now, if Tanakama holds that if the roof is so weak that pillows and blankets will just collapse and fall in, so, and Afal became the Tanakama is arguing about Yehuda, and he would say that the bottom sukkah is possible because it's sukkah tachas sukkah. If that's the case, we have the question coming back against Shmuel, because Shmuel said that it has to be possible to be a livable sukkah for the bottom sukkah to be possible, but it's clearly not true. It says, well, that you can live there. Sukkah is unlivable. Everybody agrees that you're not got a problem with sukkah tachas sukkah, and that's why in most circumstances, when you're piling on schach and you've got all these problems, it's not a problem with sukkah tachas sukkah. There's no 10 tefachim gap. It's very rare. Therefore, it's always partial. If somebody can live there easily, that means it's strong enough, and it's 10 tefachim high, then the halacha is that everybody agrees it's a sukkah tachas sukkah and it's possible. The machlekes Tanakh and Rabbi Yehuda is only one small case where it's difficult to live there, but it can be lived there through difficulty. Tanakh says it's sukkah tachas sukkah, Rabbi Yehuda says it's not. But everybody agrees of Shmuel that there has to be 10 tefachim gap. So we've got a picture over here of a sukkah tachas sukkah with a 10 tefachim gap, where it shows you here. Can you see there? There is a sukkah tachas sukkah with a proper 10 tefachim here. Well, therefore that's possible. So here, this is fine. Can you see the sukkah with 4 tefachim? That's absolutely fine. And they've even got a nice picture, if you're interested, of a tent of a tefach. You actually got a beam, and the beam goes across over a dead body. So if the beam is a tefach and you've got a dead body underneath it, and you put a jug underneath the other end of the beam, as you've got a bench or something, that will become tommy. And if you put something on top of it, it will be torah, because at the end of the day, depends if it's more than tefach or less than tefach, as to whether, or they've got 2 pictures. Okay, I'm going a slightly bit faster because, right, so tomorrow there'll be a shiur, straight out of Shachris. I am not sure whether it will go on, try to work it out. It's a definite half gets us. We will see. Either will be uploaded another shiur. Then on Shabbos, no shiur. Tishma is no shiur. Monday is Mincha 7:35. 7:30, and so next Shabbos is no shiur. And we somebody Shabbos zecher with Succca, we should be zecher to see the